To make a seated or sitting pose using IMVU Studio Toolkit, we first need to make sure that we are working from, or we are starting from, a clean default scene. So from the File menu, New, General. This will reset the scene so that we start from the basics. Don't save. So this is our scene. Next, View, Sidebar. View, Sidebar. This is where the tools live. So Sidebar, and we'll get this pop-up. And what we want is the IMVU Studio Toolkit panel. So click on that. We'll get the options. And what we want is the animation tool. So click on that. We'll expand all the options. Don't need to do anything else in the main 3D view except what we did before, which is just to make sure that we are starting from a clean scene. So we don't need to delete any of these items. Leave them where they are. All we need to do is click Append Animation File. So click on that, and it'll drop in the necessary components and adjust the interface. So what we have is a representation of the avatar, the female in this instance. It is also surrounded by these elements or these shapes that control the articulation of the skeleton and the avatar. So if we select one, doesn't matter what, press the G key to grab, and we can see that this particular shape controls the overall avatar. Select the hand, press the G key again. You can see that this controls the arm, one at the foot, press the G key, and that controls the leg. So what we do is manipulate these shapes to create our pose. So first thing we need to do before we do that is enable Auto Key. This will drop a marker into the timeline as we move and manipulate the skeleton or the rig. And if we enable that, it'll do it automatically. So click to enable, and to create a sitting pose, a simple sitting pose, make sure the timeline scrubber, this blue thing, is at frame 1. And all we need to do is grab the main manipulator, press the G key, and we can grab and move it into place freely, or just escape. We can use the widgets, so we use move and rotate. We don't use scale. Move, and this allows us to move the control shape more precisely. In this case, we are locked to the X and Z axis. And for a sitting pose, a basic sitting pose, that's all we need to do. Move that into position, and we can see that we have a marker in the timeline. So we need to adjust the hands, click, press the G key, and the elbow is bent backwards. In this instance, because, let's press escape, the elbow controls, that's these 2 points, are in front of the avatar. We need to move those behind. So grab both of them, so shift click, and we can use the widget again. We can see how the arm rotates, and what that will do is when we grab the hand now, it bends the elbow in the right direction. So that's a G key. R to rotate, G, and we can position the hand, the elbow, G, R, R, G, and there we have a simple sitting pose. So although we've got that done, one general note when creating sitting poses is that the feet or the origin point of the avatar remains at the feet, because the seat nodes that accompany furniture so that is our furniture item, they are positioned relative to this point. So we need to make sure that the legs don't clip into furniture. So always keep that in mind when creating your sitting or seated poses. So that is our pose, very simple. File, save as. We need to save these before we export. Find our file. Our location, and then save. Save as. With the file saved, we can then export. So rather than what we would normally do is File, Export, FBX. We don't need to do that anymore because the toolkit comes with its own exporter over here. So all we need to do is make sure our pose is selected. The button will highlight, but before we export, because this is a static pose, we need to make sure that Make Pose is enabled. Make Pose, and then what we can also do is enable Export All Bones, and this will overwrite everything for the derived avatar. Otherwise, it'll export only the bones that have been manipulated, which may or may not be what we want to do. So once we've got those two done, we can then click the Export button. Click. The tool does its thing and produces the file that we can now import into Studio. So in Studio, we need to create a new project. Create. And we're going to derive from the empty mood, which is a PID rather than the avatar, because it's just easier to show the process using the empty mood. So we're going to select PID and then type 10,945,930. Enter. That gives us the empty mood. That's the preview, which is nothing. There's the item. Just click Derive. Derive. So that's the empty product, so that's what we're going to be deriving from. So to import, click on the Import Asset button and then FBX. So import FBX. We need to find the file, Toolkit Sitting, open. That starts the importer. We get an initial preview. Click Setup FBX. Everything here is okay. Next. No materials because obviously there's no mesh. Next. There's our animation. 10 frames. Review. Import. And it's brought in our sequence. So what we need to do next is switch to component and create our action. So click on the action button, create our action. That's the plus sign. That's created our action, which we now edit on the right. So we're going to auto trigger this. So stance.idle, uppercase I. We need to create our ensemble where our animation lives. So plus. And if we click on the asset drop down, we should have our animation, and we do. So click that, select, set the duration, set frame 1 to frame 5, infinite loops, replace, and we can disable gaze if we want to, which is optional, apply, and then preview, And there is our pose. And it's as simple as that. Obviously, the next thing to do would be to save the file and then upload to the catalogue. But that's it. That's creating a simple sitting or seated pose using the Studio Toolkit.